And we are excited for
Welcome.
Everyone, I'm Yosh. I'm the producer. I'm also managing the door right now. We've got more than 80 people signed up. We've got about 50 people in here, and I've got other people waiting. So I'm going to hand it over to Travis because I can't chew gum and talk at the same time. I've got people signing up as we entering the box. So until everyone's in, Travis, you're in charge.
All right. Hey, everybody. I see Ikshal and Brent and Danielle. Welcome. And so a lot of new faces too. This is awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is so cool. If anybody's in the chat, definitely hop in and introduce yourselves. It'd be great to get to know everybody other than just the names on the Zoom chat.
And would you mind also muting yourself if you're not speaking? Thank you. We see a lot of people in the industry. It would be great for the purpose of this talk, which is going to be, we've purposely arranged it so we have a lot of room for Q&A. You don't have to write your questions in now, but it's helpful to know what stage of business you're in. If you are, everyone starts out this way, including myself, you know, making shit in your kitchen. I was that way until I started contracting out. So it's helpful to know, not if you're making shit in the kitchen, but if you're making things at home, if you're a business person, if you're a founder, and you've got some products already on the market, and you're ready to add some ancillary products into your line. Okay, great. Thank you so much. We've got Michael Nordstrand, mythologist here. I want everyone to know, so we're recording this. And so if you miss any part of it, we're gonna have it on YouTube. Not maybe today, but for sure.
Oh, nice. We're getting lots of people.
Thank you.
So Heather from Carta, hello. Michael Nordstrand, mythologist. We've got, hi, Antonia from Tiger Lily and Ministry of Scent. Catherine Haley Epstein, Mind Marrow, Nosedive. Check out the book if you haven't already. Tiana from Ataraxia. I'm probably butchering that, but hello. And we have M. Hello. Mason from Mizu. Hi. Danielle. I forgot how to pronounce it. Cognoscenti. Something. It sounded very French, I remember. Josh from Libertine. Hey. Sean Mar from Chatillon-Loup. And Mar Olfactive. Wow. So many people. It's going so fast. Molly Ray from Molly Ray Fragrance, Dana, Yasmin, Sydney, hello Sid, Susanna, Brett Collimer from Osu Parfum, Atelier Vivat. Hey everybody, thanks so much for coming. Somebody from London, awesome, hey. Aromatic Alchemy, Michelin. Cool.
Okay, wonderful.
Thanks for saying hi, everybody.
Yes, okay, so I still see people coming in, but it's 6 after, so I'm happy to get started. Again, everyone, thank you so much. I'm Yosh, I'm your producer. This is just like beyond wild to have so many people calling in from all over the world, all stages of business. And it's particularly exciting because I feel like this Aroma Village, this whole community has really banded together in this very unusual time, and that no one will stop us from smelling good. And no one will stop us from being creative. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks to all our presenters from not just today, but all the Instagram lives and all the other Zoom panels. We started a YouTube channel, but the Insta lives, you got to do it in, you know, that time period. And thanks also to the shout out through the press that we've gotten so far, the Perfume Society, Women's Wear Daily, and Saffron. And what we're doing today for scent and manufacturing, because I know lots of people are in the perfume business here. Thank you so much. And we have lots of questions all the time, and this industry has historically been quite closed. And so I'm, you know, I'm actually an introvert, but I'm also really chatty and very social. And so I have always lots of questions. And when I have answers, I like to share the answers. And so at some point in my, you know, almost not quite 20 years, but a lot of years, I'm just personally sick of answering the same questions. And so I'm gonna just put it to the experts, my friends and colleagues, to answer best the questions that people often have for me, because I'm not an expert at everything. You know, I'm a community builder, I'm a creative person, I have my own company called YOSH. I'm also the creative director at Scent Trunk and then the producer of this festival. But I stopped making stuff in my kitchen for a number of reasons, because I don't know how to do everything. And there's, I mean, you know, I can't even weigh stuff on a scale, to be honest. And so regulations, compliance, all of those like things that I, as I grew my brand, I had lots of questions. So I'm gonna just turn it over to our awesome panel. We've got Travis, Sarah, and Danielle. And I'm gonna ask each of them to introduce themselves, starting with Travis. And what they're gonna do is tell us their name, their companies, plural companies names, what they do at each of the companies, and while they're doing that, explain what they do. So if you know, when you say manufacturing, there's actually so many aspects of manufacturing, and that's part of the questions is, what do you guys do? And so it's very specific, because we are here mostly as indie perfumers, and there's a kind of a gap between what we do and also what hits the shelves eventually internationally, across, you know, mass market. So this niche that we have carved out for ourselves is very particular. And these three are amazing at helping small businesses grow to the next level, which next week, the Indie to Industry is about scaling. So this is really a fantastic, I'm so excited. I'm gonna stop talking and turn it over, because this is how do you get out of the kitchen and how do you get your products on the shelf in a safe, compliant way that looks super fabulous and super professional, but also very creative, and you get to control the narrative. So take it away, Travis. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Yosh, and thanks for having everybody here and for organizing this. This is so awesome. A little bit about Perfumer's Apprentice background. First of all, this was my first job. It was back in 2004. Perfumer's Apprentice started out as a fragrance creation boutique. And that lasted in downtown Santa Cruz for about 4 or 5 years before we switched to just an online store. And we had a lot of people that were requesting Givaudan and Firmenich products back then and couldn't really get them except from Bygone in large quantities. So Linda decided to let's just start selling them on the internet. And that's kind of what, you know, turned into what Perfumer's Apprentice is now, as an online supplier of small sizes of less than a kilo. So that was sort of like the beginning of what we kind of grew into based on customers' ideas. We've always kind of followed the requests and kind of tried things out that customers recommended, and it's so much fun to like listen to your ideas and grow with it. So thank you all for everybody's involvement who has reached out. It's been a fun journey. So after we started doing the supply side, we actually started switching over to, maybe in 2014, people started asking us to start compounding for them. So then we decided to open up the service of compounding, which is essentially a perfumer will submit their formula to Perfumer's Apprentice, and we will blend it as per their specifications and send it to them in a kilo. And that's taken off, and it's been really fun to watch these brands that we only saw in orders for ingredients grow, and it's really fun to watch your brands take off and follow you on social media and just become a fan. It's a really fun experience to kind of flip the script as a company. So over that process of onboarding customers on the compounding side, we had a client that was Scent Trunk, and they were going to have us do all their compounding for them. And then things kind of changed with their brand and they decided they were going to sell instead. So we made an offer and here we are. And that's kind of how Scent Trunk came on board. And it's a super fun journey with Yosh and Sid and everybody here at Perfumer's Apprentice, kind of keeping that little baby growing and healthy and happy, and involving the fragrance community, the indie perfumery movement. It's been a blast. So that's the general overview of Perfumer's Apprentice and Scent Trunk. So thanks for being here and listening.
Wow, that's like a big trajectory in a really condensed period of time. So kudos to you. That's amazing. Okay, and so we're going to switch it over, stay in California for the moment. Travis is in Northern California, and we're going to go down south to where I am right now, in the greater Los Angeles area. Sarah Horowitz, who recently had an awesome birthday, so happy birthday to you. Would you tell us your amazing career, starting in maybe Boston, and then Malibu, and then like basically bright lights, big city in Hollywood?
Well, first, Yosh, thank you so much for getting us all together. I'm so happy to be a part of this community, and I'm just amazed at the size of the community now, because as you know, when we started, I often say this, I felt like when I started yes, Yosh should just say that I had a big birthday, so I just turned 50. And when I started, I was just 18. I met a perfumer who had an independent blending bar in Boston, and I fell in love with that. I walked in, and I'll give you the Cliff Note version, but essentially they did custom blending, and he introduced me to the experience, and I completely became obsessed and fell in love, and ended up basically spending all my time in between my college classes there, until he took pity on me and gave me a job. And I worked there for 4 years. And when I was graduating college, he had decided to sell the business and close. And myself and another perfumer who worked there, Dawn Spencer Hurwitz, many of you may know her, had worked as employees. And we decided, and I knew for myself, I had developed my own technique of perfumery, which I call fragrance journey, and that's a very one-on-one connective experience to develop a fragrance for a client. So it's a session where I meet with them and I get to ask the most intimate questions, which is, by the way, what I loved about perfume is like the opening to asking total strangers the most intimate questions, right? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you love? What are your memories? What are your emotions? Because if you're in fragrance, and I believe we are all here in fragrance, we all know the powerful connection between emotion, memory, and scent. And for me, I just wanted to be able to put that together. So I bought that business when I was 22, ran it in Boston for 2 years, and then moved to California, where I still am, founded the business I have now in 1994. And at that time, when people asked what I did and I would talk about it, I felt like I was a stranger in a strange land. Like I was speaking a foreign language and no one understood what I was talking about. And as this world has grown, it's been so incredible to have a like-minded community, to find each other, people that love fragrance as much as I do. So as Yosh mentioned, I started as a perfumer, still am a perfumer, but I started working strictly by appointment. I walked up, anywhere they let me make fragrance. I had a toolbox filled with essential and fragrance oils. I did farmers markets. I walked into stores on Melrose and La Brea and Malibu. I'd set up a little table and do custom blends for anyone that would listen. And eventually that grew into a clientele. I collected phone numbers and emails in the beginning of email. And I would do little email blasts. And eventually what happened is, and that'll get to our manufacturing piece, is, I was always self-funded. And so when anyone asked me, can you do this? And it involve fragrance, I always like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then essentially I figured it out later because I had no idea how to do most of what I was doing. So I had a client when I was in Malibu. I lived in Malibu doing custom fragrances, and a woman there asked if she could hire me to develop a fragrance that then she could put her name on and put it in her store. And I, typically was like, will you pay me for that? She's like, yeah. I was like, okay, I'll do that then. And I had a very tiny contract, which also was a learning experience. It was something like a paragraph that said, hey, I'll make it and then you'll buy it. So yeah, it doesn't look like that anymore, but I developed a fragrance for her and started selling it by the pound, just making it myself, selling it to her by the pound, and she would fill it herself. And eventually her brand grew and, you know, Oprah found it. And so the next thing I knew, I was going from making a pound at a time to making 300 pounds at a time every month. And the business grew that way. So I was designing for other people. I had my own collection, which we sold to different stores, both small boutiques and larger doors. And what happened and how it got into manufacturing is I was working as a perfumer for hire, and I would develop a fragrance for someone that had a store. And one of my clients years ago said, well, I'm a retailer. I don't want to fill bottles and put stickers on. Can you just do that for me? And a typical my answer was like, yeah, if I charge you, you'll pay for it, and I'll do it. I can figure it out. I have pipettes. I have all the equipment to do it. So I started with a client in New York who sent us their bottles and their labels and all of their materials, and we were making their oil anyway. We charged her a per unit fee, and we did 50 bottles at a time, so she could order it as a retailer and have a finished product that we would ship. And so we just sort of started doing that very small for my clients, people that I designed a fragrance for. And they would grow. So we would do 50 bottles or 100 bottles or 500 bottles per fragrance. In 2016, we had a client that came to me that I did not do the perfume for, but had heard that I was doing these small run productions and wanted to launch her brand with 4 different fragrances and had no idea if they were going to sell or not, or which one would sell. So she couldn't find a contract manufacturer that would fill a small run. Most manufacturers had at least 1,000 pieces per SKU, per fragrance, if not 2,500 pieces per fragrance. So we said, yeah, I'll do it. You know, we'll fill 500 bottles per fragrance. So it ended up being 2,000 for the whole order. And her brand started growing as well. And so from there, we started taking on people that I didn't have anything to do with the fragrance. We just became their manufacturer that specializes in small, sort of high-end niche brands. And now my business does have a manufacturing wing. So I still work as a perfumer, but I also oversee the production piece, which is, as I said, small. We're not a large company. We do everything by hand, although we have a couple of semi-automatic machines now. We started around, you know, we've worked with as small minimums as 100 bottles, 250, and we can go up to 10,000 pieces now, pretty seamlessly. So that's how I got into it, the manufacturing piece. I really started as a perfumer, overseeing and manufacturing my own brand. And now it's really exciting, as Travis said, to work with new brands that have that similar vision that I had of wanting to launch something niche and bespoke and beautiful and handcrafted, but find someone that can enable them to launch 500 pieces and make sure the sticker was on correctly and the packaging was done well and it's crimped and collared and all of those things. Yeah, that's pretty much where we are today. So thank you for having me.
Oh, wow. That is really an amazing story. And we want to get back to some of those incredible numbers that you relate to us. I want to tell the audience a little factoid that many people do not know, but where Sarah got her start is exactly the same guy. Unbeknownst to us, his name is Harpo. He recently passed, I think a year and a half ago. But I didn't meet the guy until I was in Aspen, and he had the same program, this like fragrance bar, and that's where I got my start. And I was in Malibu also, but at a different time period. And then when I met Sarah finally, I was like, oh my God, you're like my twin. This is so weird. We literally went through the same place, and also grew our business very similarly with custom clients, events. But I, on the other hand, do not want to. I've visited Sarah's incredible manufactory in several renditions, several locations, and I am completely in awe because that like frightens me to no end. So if you ever get invited to go visit her, do it because it's truly incredible. So now we want to turn it over to Danielle over in Pennsylvania, who has also an incredible story, starting all the way at Firmenich. So tell us about where you got started, how you got started, and all that, and bring us to present day with olfactive as well through notology.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me as well. I certainly appreciate the invite and the inclusion. Hello to everybody out there. I'm on the East Coast today, and I started my fragrance journey actually when I was in grad school, and I was studying to become a psychologist, and I wanted to prescribe scent instead of medication. I was working with a college population at the time, and they needed something other than talk therapy, but I wasn't quite sure what that other thing was, and I knew it wasn't medication. So this was about 20 years ago or so. I was looking through research journals, and it was yoga and meditation and guided imagery, and then I came across some research on scent and the powerful effects of aromas on our moods and behaviors. And I thought, wow, this is super interesting. But I didn't want my clients at the time to be smelling, vials of oils. I thought that would be strange. So I decided to take the aromas and put it into a bar of soap. And in my kitchen, in a stock pot, made my first round of soap and put some scent in there, and I gave it out. And what happened through that process is, one, I was getting that scent into the client's daily routine. They're taking a shower, they're bathing. I could assure them that they were getting aroma every single day for at least 10 minutes. So I was getting my job done on my client side. What was also happening when I was manufacturing is that I had extras. So I just gave them away to people. And people said, hey, I like this, can I buy it? And I really had no intention of going into this career at all. I wanted to be a psychologist the entire time. But I was so fascinated with fragrance that it just kept on drawing me to it. So really in the beginning, I was self-taught, and I started manufacturing all of my own products. And at that time, I was also 100% natural as well. So it was candles, soaps, body products, lotions, creams, lip balms, kind of that whole array of things. I started in just kind of a traditional route. I went out to craft shows and farmers markets and sold my goods there. Eventually, though, I did build up that company and started my own retail stores. So I had several retail stores. This was under a different brand name because I sold it eventually, but this brand was called Danielle and Company, and we sold to a couple hundred, maybe 300 or 400 retailers across the country. We worked with, I was on QVC, we worked with the Marriott Corporation, Hallmark stores. So we had a very robust wholesale division. At that point, we brought in some contract manufacturing. So that was, we would take, usually we would take our formulas and we would alter them in some way for the customer, or it would be straight up our own formulas that we would private label. So private label is putting their brand onto our product, and then they go ahead and sell it. So we brought that into the mix as well. And within the Danielle and Company, we did not do any fine fragrance at that time with this brand at all. So I ended up, did I cover everything? Yeah, we did contract manufacturing, retail, wholesale. So we ended up selling the brand in 2010. And I kind of had to lay low for a bit because of some non-competes that I had. And then after that, I went and worked at Firmenich. So Firmenich, if you're not familiar, is a very large fragrance and flavor house. And I worked there actually as a consumer insight analyst. So as an analyst, I worked directly with consumers every single day, testing out the products that our perfumers created. So that really tied in, going back to my psychology, and really where everything I do kind of stems from is really looking at the psychological aspects of it. I spent some time at Firmenich, met some of my other indie perfumers that I work with now there, had a great, amazing time, but also realized that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. My job at Firmenich was to research day in and day out, and that's what I did, and I did that really well, but I missed wearing all the hats that we wear. So I ended up leaving there and coming back and starting Notology. which was formerly called Note Fragrances. We were kind of at the tail end of a rebrand. After about 7 or 8 years with the brand, we said, you know, what are we really about? Is it just about the notes or the scent, or is it about the psychology too? So I tried to converge, you know, notes and ology to form Noteology, the psychology of notes. So within this brand, we are still manufacturers. So we're manufacturing all of the original things that I manufacture with Danielle Company. So the candles, the personal care, air care, body care, all those things. But with this brand, I also brought in fine fragrances. So I've been the perfumer for our brand the whole time. I do oversee the manufacturing, but I don't necessarily do the manufacturing myself anymore. So we're producing for our own brand under our own name. We're doing a few private label with our body products and our air care products, but we don't private label our fragrances. So our fragrances are our own, and we don't put that formula on anybody else's brand name. But we will do contract manufacturing. So we will create something, we'll do the creative from scratch and work with brands to create, whether it's just a neat oil, whether it's a finished solution, or whether we're putting into its final format. So in the Noteology brand, we have 2 retail stores, an e-commerce site, and we're doing the manufacturing as well. And then in 2018, I acquired OLFACTORY. So if you are not familiar with OLFACTORY is a subscription box service. I really like to think of it as a discovery platform that solely focuses on niche fragrances. So every month I curate a theme, and within the theme, there are either 3 vials or 6 vials of fragrances, depending on what box you choose. And it's only featuring niche fragrances, which I adore. And how, just like with Travis worked with Scent Trunk, I also worked with them before I acquired OLFACTORY. And I had our fragrances in the box for many years. And when Tara Swartz, the past owner, wanted to kind of go in a different direction with her career, we purchased the company from her. So on the OLFACTORY side, it's a subscription box with a monthly box that is curated based on the theme. And then we also sell the full-size bottles and the samples for brands as well. So it's really a discovery platform through subscription or just through e-commerce. And it was all e-commerce up until last year. And then right around the holidays, we decided to put it into retail as well. So we expanded our location in Scranton, took over the store next to us that had left, and put an OLFACTORY boutique in there. We were planning actually to do kind of a big grand opening around March 20th, and that came to a quick halt. So we have not truly put that in, but where I'm standing, this is the, if you can see, this is the Noteology store in Clark Summit. What is behind me is our custom perfume studio. So we also have an in-studio experience where people can come in and make a fragrance with us from scratch. I train all of our scent designers, and then they work with the customers to make their own fragrance through individual appointments or private parties. And then maybe if I turn my screen, you can see on the other side, that is the OLFACTORY boutique. I think you can see it on the other side of the store. So here we are. So that is me in a nutshell. I own the business with my husband, Mark. He's been with me personally for 20 years and with the business for 15. And then we have 9 staff members as well that work with us. And that's what we do.
Wow, deep breath. That is so.
Yeah, I hope that wasn't too long. I feel like I was talking for a long time.
No, it's so informative, because what I see is a theme in each of you is you grew your business, and then there was at some point a need from clients and then personal desire to have awesome customer service. So you were able to pivot and meet that need. Whereas I personally, when people ask me stuff, I'm like, no. So it's like, that's the key, obviously, to growing a manufacturing business, is to say yes and figure it out later. So awesome. Noted. And then what I also love is that all the pain points that you had, you did the diligence to figure out, which for the Scent Festival, there have been many pain points, including how to make a YouTube channel and put this on there. So I've had to up level skills. So you've had to listen to the customers, up level the skills, and then figure out how to way to also monetize that. So contracts for everyone is always kind of like, unless you're a lawyer and you love this stuff, it's always sort of like we've grown up not being able to ask questions, but that's important to be a sustainable business, that you have to just be brass tacks about it and take the emotions out. What I want to ask the audience is, you know, go ahead and like start putting in some questions, because we probably have themes. But what I want to get back into is each of you seem, I mean, so, like we're all in this business together, but from just the three of your stories, there's some similarities, but they're actually quite different. So if I'm a perfumer, if I'm a customer, if I'm already a business person, I have a fashion brand, I have a cosmetics or a hair brand, I might do my due diligence and find each of you, but what it sounds like is each of you actually does something quite different. Right, so this is great. This is exactly, this will be my pain point, is my pivot, is there a resource for contracts, learning how to contract, a class for contracts, and advice. Oh, you know what? You should come to the indie and indie to industry session next week. We'll touch on a lot of resources for that. I didn't prepare any resources, only because the resources that Miriam, who's on the call now, and Antonia, you know, again, leave it to awesome people to do all that work. So come to next week, we've got lots of resources on that one. So what I want to turn over is because I'm sure there's a similarity, because I know for myself, I've got like favorite clients and also challenging clients, and clients who are just not ready, right? They're kind of doing their due diligence, but what are some questions that, you know, you wish, or is there some way to give advice to people who want to work with you? Like, what kind of questions make a great client? Like, oh my God, I'm super excited about this project because they have a business plan. They've done their market research. They know what the hole is in the market, and they have a unique proposition, and not like, oh, can you duplicate this thing? And also, realistically, they understand formulation and creativity, like, right, like your things that you might feel are genius making at home may not be suitable for the market because of compliance issues. So could you kind of give us a view like own businesses, what some of your top 3 like awesome customers have done that you feel like, wow, it made that process seamless for you? And maybe just one, not necessarily a pet peeve, but the thing like, oh, well, if you could do this piece of homework, it would make working together a little bit easier, right? So, you know, not, say again?
Sorry, there's somebody at our door. So sorry.
Yeah. Travis, could we turn it over back to you again? And if you could give us like some insights, because you're selling a lot of supplies right now, but then you've pivoted and now you're helping some of these buyers, customers, contract fill, right? But there's
Right.
some things you don't do and some things that you do. Can you give us some pointers on what makes a great customer who's ready for you versus who you need to really like do some homework or grow your business a little bit more type thing?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I didn't actually mention in the beginning was that feeds into this well, was that we offer a regulatory service, which basically we can produce safety data sheets based on physical testing of your product, and we also can do IFRA conformity. We sign an NDA with you, a mutual non-disclosure agreement, and we also do an EU allergen test. One thing that I like when we onboard somebody for contract blending is when they know what their priorities are. So if we're going to go and compound something for them, do you need to sell into the EU? Do you have these broad goals? Does your formulation need to meet certain standards? And if so, let's vet that formula early, so you can reformulate now rather than, you know, be halfway through production and then find out, oh, I really want to get into France, and you're like, uh-oh, you know. So it's nice to sort of have those conversations up front. and just let the customer decide what they're, you know, what they're comfortable with and what their goals are. And I respect the people that are like, nope, I don't want to do IFRA. I don't care about IFRA. Cool. That doesn't affect us at all. Like, you're in the United States, you don't have to comply with IFRA if you don't want to. But I'd rather ask early. So it's nice when people know the lingo, they know what IFRA is, or they know what allergen is, you know, just all of these sorts of, like, a little bit of base knowledge. That helps a ton, because I kind of call it starting with the alphabet. Like, if I feel like there almost should be a class on just the industry, sometimes, just to sort of, you know, just unleash all the information that they kind of need to know just for stepping in. So yeah, so to get back to the answer, knowledge of the industry in terms of needs, regulatory, how big they want to grow, and what that's going to look like down the line is huge. The next one is, for us, is a business plan. Like, you know, if you are a client who just watched something online and you just got inspired and you want to start a fragrance brand, like, it's awesome. It's a great journey, and I'm so excited for you. But don't call us first, because I'm not going to be equipped as a company to lead you through that process. I think there are, like, marketing firms and places that do that, but that's just not us, and I don't know who is. So having a business plan, knowing your bottles, your labels, having a whole plan basically in place is huge. And then the last one is that when we start, when we either compound or we do any turnkey, we do a little bit of turnkey services. And when I say that, I mean, we'll basically take your fragrance, put it in alcohol, bottle it, and label it. We do very little of that right now, because we're not that equipped. It sounds like Danielle and Sarah are great resources for you if that's what you're after. But having an SOP, so basically, when we get your bottles and your labels and we get your packaging, we know, based on your standards, how you want your brand represented on the bottle. You know, knowing exactly the placement of the bottle, like the step-by-step that we can use to QC our own staff for how you're representing your own product, it's not something that may come to mind at first, because it seems like common sense to you because you're doing it in your own studio all the time. But when you pass it off to somebody else, it's your baby. You know, you really have to put in your due diligence and know that, like, the person on the other end doesn't know all the care you put into that. So the more that you can front load them with, the faster it'll go, and the more successful I think the relationship will be. So those are my top three.
Right. That's awesome. So kind of to repeat that, but to have knowledge, so do your research, and to also have an understanding of your business plan, but also, in order to help you and your team better, the client should have standard operating procedure. That was the SOP. And then, right, and so that for QC, quality control, that everything is clear and understandable to your manufacturing line, because you personally won't be out there filling the bottles. You have a team doing that. So I will say for myself, when I was filling bottles in my kitchen, I was doing things one way by hand, and my assistants, who were at that point for me personally filling hundreds of bottles for me, Chrissy would do it one way, Eleanor would do it another way, Susan would do it another way, and the final product would be the same. But I found that in watching them each do however they were doing it differently, I could develop a great procedure, because then when I did work with a contract manufacturer, thank God I wrote everything down, because they demanded it. I couldn't work with them. I had a manufacturer in Chicago. I don't work with them anymore, but thank God I had an SOP, because how I was doing it was appropriate for a kitchen, but totally not appropriate for a manufacturer. So thanks for letting people know. Red alert, if you don't have an SOP, one, look it up. B, you can YouTube everything, and just talk out loud every process and pretend that you have a team of 10 people doing it for you, and they want to know, okay, things like, does the tissue go in front of the box or after the box? And where does this brochure go? Does it go under the bottle or over the bottle? And when do you want us to put the European label sticker on it, on the inside or the outside of the box? And you're like, oh my God, okay, let me think about this. So all of those things need to happen. And if it's going to Europe, you need to do your registration, get a lawyer if you don't know how to do that, make sure your allergen list is correct, the way it's supposed to be, on the bottle, on the box, la da 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 da. So that's what you're doing. That's amazing. Whew, it's making me sweaty just remembering all those things. Sarah, so I've got questions for you, because how does someone go from like making 50 bottles to fucking 300 pounds a time a month? And can I just ask you, I know this is like in front of everyone, but we're all friends. Was that brand Kai by chance? Because I know you were behind that brand, and like that was and it was also an Oprah's favorite. So I'm being like a perfume sleuth, but that brand was like a milestone for perfume oils. I know that you also are the nose behind Fleur, which is like, you know, blasted the market with a lot of just like, no, not Fleur. Okay.
No.
Okay, you're gonna have to correct me.
Yeah. Kai, yes. Fleur, no.
Sorry, no, somebody else. Sorry, I can't think of the name.
I have a lot of amazing clients, and I'm very grateful for it. And some of them, you know, like Kai, which I did that in 1997 for her. You know, she had a vision for what she wanted, and we worked very collaboratively to design it. And then she really grew that business, and I became the manufacturer of the oil for a period of time until she moved to a larger house. Because unlike Travis, I was not able to produce, I don't have a regulatory department. So I wasn't able to do an SDS or a COA or IFRA statement or anything like that. How it grew from a pound at a time to 300 pounds at a time was I had a scale, and I was literally blending it. When we were doing the 300 pounds, I had a scale that could do a 3 pound max. And over the course of a few days, 3 pounds at a time, I made that. So that was, you know, we've learned a lot since then, and I have a much bigger scale now than I did then, but that's how that grew. And so having, you know, to that point though, having a scale is critical when you're scaling up. So, you know, I know when I started, it was by drops. I don't know how many of you are starting by drops, but when I started, I would make my formula by drop, and then eventually I got a scale and I weighed every drop, and then I could translate my formulas from drops to grams, and then I could create, you know, 1 pound, 5 pounds, 100 pounds, 300 pounds. So that's how that piece grew. But to back on, I mean, I use Travis's services myself because that regulatory piece is so critical and so difficult if you're blending on your own. It's such a great resource that I didn't have in the beginning. So that's something you need. And then back to, was that the question, or should I just back on, like the SOP is critical? I would also say when you're starting, on top of just having a plan, which is important, having an SOP, which is also extremely important. I find it's very helpful when people, like, we don't do any design services as far as packaging. So having your visual piece, having your logo, that's not what we're going to be able to do for you. We can actually assemble everything and create the finished product, but you have to be the visionary of your brand. And the other piece that I think is really important is having the budget to fulfill your vision and knowing what that is. And when I say be properly funded, and I do say that, be properly funded, it doesn't mean that you have to have $1 million investment or $100,000 investment, but it does mean that you need to know how much financial investment you're going to need to do whatever it is that you want to do, and that you're going to be able to pay for it. So that way you're not coming in, like Travis said, and I'm sure Danielle, I know you've had this experience too, where you say someone has read an amazing book or put 2 different fragrances on that they bought on the market, and people stop them on the street and they're like, oh my God, I have this vision. I want to layer this Chanel fragrance and this Marc Jacobs fragrance, and that's going to be my scent. Not that that doesn't smell amazing, but there has to be the understanding of what goes behind that to create the scent. And, you know, even if you're starting small with 100 bottles that you found on Amazon and traditional box that you're going to design your label for, understand how much all those pieces cost, what your cost of goods are. If you're having someone else fill, know that there's going to be a price per unit that you're going to have to pay for that. I always tell this to my clients in you know, any class I teach, but if you're doing it right now at home and you're doing your manufacturing at home and you're basing the cost of your product on your cost of goods, make sure you are putting in a cost for your labor, because eventually as you grow, you're going to pay someone else to do it. And if you don't, just because you're doing it doesn't mean that it's free. Just because you're doing it in your house doesn't mean that you shouldn't be being paid an hourly rate, or at some point you're going to be paying someone an hourly rate. So you have to make sure that every single bottle that you are creating a cost of goods for is carrying the weight of labor of somebody filling it, even if that somebody is you and you're not paying yourself yet. We've all been there. So make sure, because your goal is that one day you are going to be paying someone to do it, and you want to make sure that that's in your budget of your cost of goods for your product when you go out and sell it. So for me, that's the most critical. Is I'm not looking for someone that has to have a big investment, but you have to understand that you're going to need to pay for your product. And whatever that financial investment is, whether it's large or small, you need to have that in order to grow, in order to really get started.
Okay, we've got lots of great questions, and we some of them are a little bit more specific, but as far as like filling, I'm going to just take the answer is generally speaking, of course, is the smaller your quantity, the higher the price per cost, right? And so I would say for anyone who's got actual cost questions, figure out which of these three amazing panelists is the most likely that you're can work with to get those costs, because there's like a general intake form. And when you go to those meetings, including compliance, you need to make a checklist for yourself to find out, okay, you know, like I've done a lot of mentoring in my life, and you know, I have an intake form, and if you can't answer those questions, don't ask somebody else to ask those questions for you, right? So the number one is, if you ever plan on exporting to Dubai, because you know you've got lots of people who are apparently spending gobs of money, or Russia, you need to do your due diligence first before you talk to these three, you know, because it's important to know what those criteria are. You know, it's basically basic math. What's your answer? And then you work backwards. All right. And so I'm going to turn it over to Danielle. What are some pain points, and also what are some of the best clients that you might have that have brought projects to you, to your table? I mean, I suppose you've been on many sides of the fence already. You've bought and sold business already. And if you were manufacturing, I know, Sarah, you also had something with QVC. So you both have already had personal brands, hugely successful, with thousands and thousands of products at a time, while also families at home, dogs and kids, and you've got the side business and the manufacturing business. So how do you, how do you know when to say yes to a client? And of course, best practice, know when to say no to clients, because the project's not quite right. The project, the client doesn't have all the balls together in their court. What are some like red flags maybe?
I think, I could probably speak to it on personal experience. And if I had to sum it all together, it would be kind of a crawl, walk, run phase. We talk about that a lot in business. And a lot of times I think a red flag for me when a customer is coming in is, they want to manufacture everything under the sun. They want to have every type of body care product with a fragrance, and they want to have 6 or 8 variants. And their market demographic is, anybody that walks outside is going to use their product. And they're trying to run, and they really need to start walking. I can talk from my own experience. The first time QVC approached me, I wanted to say yes, and I said no. I really looked at what they were requiring, their quantities. Could I fulfill this? Could I handle it afterwards? Did I have the support team in place? And I actually turned down the first QVC appearance because I really felt we just were not ready for it as a company. Now I did reapproach them, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years later after that. We did go on and we were very successful with them, but it was at a time that I could handle it. I can also speak to another time that I said yes, I think too quickly. So we had one of our fragrances, our Pink Peony fragrance, in the Ipsy glam bags 2 or 3 years ago. And for that project, we had to do 252,000 5 ml bottles.
What? Can you repeat that number?
Yeah, so
252,000?
252,000 units. And it was something that I said yes to, and I really did do my due diligence prior to it, and I got all my pieces together. I had to open up a separate manufacturing facility. I brought in I bought 2 other lines of filling machines for it. I had to run, because of the constraints of when it had to be filled, it had to be all filled within a 6-week time frame. So we actually ran a crew 24/7 for 6 weeks, with 6 people per shift, Monday through Friday, and then 3 people on the weekend shift to get this done. And that was, I would say, to date, my most stressful period. Now, we were very successful with it. We got it under budget and ahead of schedule, and everything went smoothly. But I underestimated how much that was going to take on. So I think when you're starting a new brand or you're looking to scale, it's really taking a step back and saying, am I ready to handle this? You know, is this a side hustle? Not a problem with it being a side hustle at all, especially if you're just first starting. But how do you want to approach scaling? I think it's just knowing where you want to be in the future is so important for when you first start. That would be something I think would be a really big takeaway for me when I was just starting, is where do you see this? What is your end goal with this? You know, is it that you want to sell it someday? Is it that this is just maybe a side hustle and something that you're going to do to tap into a creative part of you, but also something that you want to make some money at? None of those, where you want to be doesn't really matter. It's just knowing that. I think that's the key. So when we have clients that come in, you know, for red flags and things that we look for, it's for people being very kind of clear and concise about what they want, who they're going to be selling it to, how many variants, what's the vision. And then once we contract with them, then we go into briefing. So briefing is kind of like a request for proposal. It's an industry word that we use. And it's pretty much a one-on-one questionnaire going back and forth. We're talking about, you know, what are we building? Why are we building? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What's the packaging? What's the vision? You know, think of mood boards, vision boards. That goes into the briefing stage, and we don't bring that in until we actually hire, you know, the person hires us.
And then I want to open it up to questions, because wow, this hour flew by so fast. So if each of you would stay maybe a few minutes after, because this is getting so juicy, I also want to okay, we've got questions, but I want to address the math really quickly. I think a lot of people who are indies and who are still operating out of their kitchens, again, no shame, because we all started that way, is a lot of people don't understand which math, and they think there's only one math formula. But when you're talking to manufacturers, you're talking about the supply side and the cost per unit, and that's a very different mathematical formulation and price point than when you're factoring in retail price and cost. And so that part is, you have to consider your packaging, marketing, blah, 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 blah. So for anyone who thinks there's only one math formula, you need to start there and figure out all the different mathematical equations one must need to go from concept to packaging, manufacturing, to retail, including all the people involved. If you have sales agents, wholesale, resale, any distributors, and fucking shipping, like, whoa. Shipping, you have to add the costs for shipping of your component parts to these 3 individuals. So if you're shipping from China, how are you going to get it to these guys? That's got to be included in your SOP, by the way, for SOP for yourself, and then the details on how do you guys do this, right? Okay, so we've got lots of great questions. So please, we're going to also talk a little bit more about math in the indie to industry, because that's going to be more specific to scale. And Miriam will discuss a little bit about cost per use. I think that was her phrase. Okay, so we've got some questions. I'm going to just shout them out so that everyone knows what we're going for. Standard per unit fill to factor. How did you navigate compliance? Talk to Travis, his company does that. How do you deal with ownership of your formula when working with private label clients? Do they buy the oil and therefore own it, or do you keep it and they continue ordering the oil from you? There's some industry standards, so let's talk about that. Sarah, you've got lots of unfortunate growing pains from that particular question. Still quite curious about bottles box manufacturers who are supportive of smaller businesses. So that's sourcing. These three don't source. That should be, we don't have a session on that, but duly noted.
I could throw out one little company, Coverpla in the US. They are really wonderful to work with. Their minimum is like a dollar amount. It's not the most approachable to most people, but if you want a crimp style bottle, they're great to work with, and they have really high-end bottles. They might work for you, they might not, but I recommend them.
That's true. And then one question is a good one too, is can you talk about natural ingredients opposed to synthetics? Yeah, that's a good question for all of you. Okay, and here's a note from the audience. IAO has a resource page. Yeah, okay, good. So custom design bottles, this is not a sourcing session, so none of these three people know about custom bottles. So, but let's ask the question of, which I think is a good one, natural synthetics as opposed to commercial. Any of you want to take that one? And then the formulation, sorry, the ownership of formulation, Sarah.
Well, it depends. And, you know, the industry has changed even in the last few years in regards to this. Traditionally, the formula has always been owned by the perfumer or perfume house. And then when you're designing the fragrance for someone else, they have the exclusive right to buy that fragrance from you or from the fragrance house, but they don't actually own the formula. They just have the exclusive right to buy it. And you as the perfumer, or if you're working with a larger house, that house doesn't, and this is up until recently, it's changed now. The fragrance house owns the formula, but they can't sell that formula to anyone but you. It's your formula and it's proprietary to you, so you would have the exclusive right to purchase it. Now with the change in regards to transparency of ingredients and clean, there are fragrance houses that are actually giving you the formula outright, you know, just so that they can have that transparency in materials. Some fragrance houses are still protected because they actually manufacture some of the raw molecules and materials, so it's still difficult to duplicate. As an independent perfumer, when I work for a client, I maintain the ownership of the formula, and then they purchase the oil. So my business continues a cash flow relationship with the client. They order the oil, I put a margin on the oil, and then I still make a margin and they get the fragrance. I'm not allowed to sell it to anybody else but them. There are cases where someone just wants to own the formula, and then you can make a price for that, and that should be a much higher price than like what I charge as a consulting and development fee. That's a separate price that doesn't include any actual oil. And then after that, they could order the finished approved fragrance, and then I have a price for that oil. But traditionally, fragrance houses will own the actual formula. It just depends on how you're working it. If you want it to be clean, Sephora clean, you know, looking at all the lists, some of the houses, not all, but some of them are now, once you purchase it, you can actually see the formula. Even on their website, you'll get a code and you can go on their website and see it.
Yeah, and then I want to speak to that. So that specific question for the fragrance house, we're going to talk a lot about that next week because we're going to specifically talk about how to work with fragrance houses as you scale your business. And that's Indie to Industry, led by Miriam Baraldes and also Olivia Jan, who have IFF, Givaudan, Robertet, Griffin experience. So they're going to talk about that more. We had another good question about custom bottles. So that's a good question, actually. And I think this is the question is, when you have custom bottles and we want to send them to you for use, right? So they're standard bottles, standard cripping, 15 neck size, blah, 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 blah. How do you work with custom bottles when you're manufacturing? There must be an added cost because it must take longer to put those packages together, right? So,
No.
So you don't care if it's a standard bottle package or custom packaging, you'll figure
It
out.
depends on, I'm sure Travis and Danielle will answer this as well, but when we're filling it, it depends on the quantity. If it's a smaller run, we're filling it by hand, so it doesn't really make a difference what the shape of the bottle is. We're filling it by hand, and most bottles have a standard neck size. Of 50 ml or 100 ml are going to have a standard neck size that most pumps are going to, the pump will fit. If we're doing large runs, we have a semi-automatic machine where we have what's called a star. We have basically a plate made that will fit your bottle. And there's a startup one-time fee to cover that, but it brings your manufacturing price down. And that's made for your bottle. So it wouldn't really matter if it's a custom shape or not.
Got it.
Yeah, same for us. We would just, if we needed to, we would just, order custom tooling for the machines so that it could fit the bottle. And then we would, the customer would pay for that price, a one-time fee, and then we would run it into our, our production line that way.
Right. Like I have a cocktail in a can that I'm working on for a customer, and to order a custom bottle, you have to pay for the tool, basically. I know with Travis and I, we're doing custom packaging, and thank God
For the mold.
for the mold, you have to pay for the mold, including stickers. If your sticker is a weird size, and I'm like freaking maniacal about doubling up on sizes. So I don't want 10 stickers. I want one sticker to do 10 things. So that's how you get your price down too. You got to just be smart. I used to have a packaging company to say they only did stuff in China, and he would say, oh yeah, I love working with Chinese because they're super, super smart and super resourceful. And you can get, now of course, manufacturing because of Corona, who knows what the fuck is going to happen with that. But the Chinese have figured out lots of ways to like maximize cost because they're super engineers. This is the beauty of working with China, is you can take a crazy idea and they can, the sliders, the leather cuts. That's amazing. Okay, another question. Do you do crimp bottles or screw on for small runs? Is there a difference in both?
Doesn't matter.
No, doesn't matter.
If you are doing things at home, you need to get the hockey puck, which the moment I personally went from oil to EDP, I just got it out of my house right away because I don't have the patience. So unless you want to have a hockey puck situation and hand crimp, or get the thing, I don't know what you call it, the crimper, I just get over. So thank God for the three of you. It's 11:05. Are there any other questions? I feel my head is quite full. This has been so amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Any last minute questions for everyone? So I have recorded this. It's going to be on YouTube because I took a bunch of notes. Sometimes you just have to slow it down and replay it. One last question for, where did they learn their perfumery skills? And they're both self-taught. And then someone is an aspiring master perfumer one day. What suggested road do you take?
Know your materials. And take time. It takes time. So know your materials, really work with your materials, and play. Don't be afraid to play. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you will. And give yourself time. None of this happens overnight in any art form.
Yeah, I agree totally. And when you're practicing and you're really starting to first learn, really try to train yourself to do it daily. Learn those materials. Pick out maybe 5 materials a day that you're going to really study, and smell them and work with them each day, and give yourself time. It takes a long time. I'm still learning, but I've been doing this for 20 years now, and new materials come out all the time. And it's really just knowing your materials, getting in tune with them, really connecting that mental connection to what you're smelling. That's a really great way to help with olfactive training. So yeah, just practice, play, have fun with it. Know it's going to take time. Be inspired by other brands. I'm always, especially now with Olfactive, we're seeing all brands coming through all the time. So keep your mind open and explore.
And then I want to add, you know, we're all self-taught here, but I have had plenty of students who I've written recommendations for a SIPCA, and they've been accepted. And we've got, you know, people here and people on our panel who are professionally trained perfumers who have gone to university level, also have chemistry degrees. So if that's your personality and you want to geek out, go to school and study and do that conventional route, because you will learn so much about, I don't know a lot of the molecules, but I'm okay with it. I like evaluating now. And so my perfume career has really shifted, and I don't manufacture. And so if you want to go to school, like Donna has gone to school, Olivia Jan next week, she's amazing, and has a stellar career at, a large perfume house. There was a question about, is there a difference between naturals and synthetics for commercial? That question could maybe be better addressed next week, because we're going to be dealing specifically with fragrance houses. So I would suggest, Nadia, you come to that one, because this is really
my first instinct, just based on the raw material cost, is that you're going to have to make sure that you're ready to scale that price in your, just naturals cost more, generally speaking. So, if that's like Guerlain does it, but Guerlain costs a lot. So, just maybe keep that in mind. That's the only simple thing that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
The other thing for naturals is you can't claim, not everybody wants to do this, but there's a lot of talk about allergens and saying it's, no allergens. You can never do that. If you're working with just naturals, you can't say allergen free or anything like that, because it's just not possible. So just on that note, if you're working with all naturals, be clear about it, know what the limitations are. And to Travis's point, just be prepared that those prices will go up and, over time. If you're not working with 100% naturals, please do not use the word natural in your marketing, because it's not an adjective. So we have a lot of perfumers. I've seen a lot of brands come and go that have said, it's 100% natural blend using cottonwood musk and unicorn tears or something. Please, if it's not 100% natural, be transparent. There's nothing wrong with working with synthetics, as long as it's synthetics and you say that what they are, but be what you are. If there's nothing else that's happening in this movement, in this time, people want authenticity. Be who you are, say who you are, do not be afraid of it. If you're working with all naturals, say it, own it, be prepared to charge for it, and know what their limitation and their benefits are. If you're working with synthetics, then own it, love it, know what they are, know what they can do, know what they can't do, and do not claim that they are anything that they're not, because the customer now not only wants authenticity, but they're savvy. They will research your materials, and they will come after you and say, hey, I just found out that there's actually no natural unicorn tears. So I think your marketing is off. So just be careful, be consistent, and be transparent. That's what I would say.
Right.
A short answer for Ryan Hunt's about the IFRA compliance. If you want to sell outside of the US and you're not IFRA compliant, I believe you can, yes, sell outside of the US in general, but I don't think that you'll get through the EU. I think the EU is the one you won't get into. So I think you can sell in a lot of other countries, but each country has their own vetting process for you to be able to sell fine fragrance into their country. So it's something you'll have to research. But the simple answer is yes, but it's complicated.
So I just want to add to that. If you're selling like one or two things to a single customer, like close your eyes and don't tell anybody. But if you expect to do any serious business and scale, you need to pay for compliance, pay for a lawyer, and pay for an export professional freight forwarder, because your other end, your distributor, they need to register it on that side of the country. So in my lifetime, I've had 9 different distributors in 9 different markets, and every single one, I had to send product and have it registered in each country. And you need to be serious about that stuff if you want to scale it appropriately and have your name on the other side, your face on the other side of the country, and feel confident that you're not going to like blow someone's face up by accident because you didn't do your due diligence. I'm not saying you're doing that on purpose, but people in the EU take the regulatory very seriously. My stuff is still being registered in China, and it's taken months. And so you need to pay a lawyer to make sure that not only do you have the regulations and all the allergy and all the compliance, but that it's registered in the appropriate countries correctly with the governing bodies. So
yeah, and regulatory is two things. It can be the IFRA safety, consumer safety thing, but it can also just be the physical property of that material shipping into the country. So flammability, that's one reason hazmat costs. If you get caught not following those rules, your company can get blacklisted and you will not be able to sell into that country again. I'm not trying to scare people. It's not like it happens all the time, but it is something you're opening yourself up to as a possibility. Not to mention fines. I mean, the fines can be horrible if you get caught trying to purposefully mislead a hazmat shipment saying it's not when it is. You know, it's just things to consider. So
right. And so we're going to address more of
Maybe I can add something from my experience, Philip Kraft here. So one thing I observed with naturals versus synthetics, and maybe you don't look into that as an independent perfumer, but when we analyze some of the indie perfumes, I saw myself sometimes that indie perfumers tend to use some expired natural materials. So if they have some stock, for instance, of some resins and so on. So usually, or I caught a lot of people, I never told that, but caught a lot of things that were actually over the expiration date. So you see in the GCMS, and when you look into that, some quite toxic stuff actually, because the materials are some sort of 3 years old, polymerized at the bottom, and some of the indie perfumers say, well, I bought this expensive oil from France, I want to use it still, and I kept it in the fridge. But actually you see a lot of, well, decomposed shit sometimes in the naturals that people, just because it was expensive, are still going to use. And that's something I just observed from my formulas, and I just want to plead the people who do it, please don't do it, because basically you're causing allergies for your customers, and this can be really dangerous for people, or, well, not totally killing you, but really give you some bad allergies. And that's the other thing. So if you want to work with naturals, not only invest into them, but keep them also unexpired. If you keep them for years, then that's really very important. I just saw it myself. I never blamed the people, but there are a few independent companies out there I could name that are really using expired stuff, and this is not the cool thing. So even if it's natural, but natural rotten is not really good.
This is so helpful. Thank you again. And from Z, if it expires, make incense with it. That's perfect. And then again, I think a lot of these questions are a little bit more pertinent to the indie to industry, because we're going to be talking specifically about working with a fragrance house. So I wanted to do this session first because I think a lot of people don't understand how they can grow this part and what all the components are. And so next week will be more specific to fragrances, not just in fine fragrance, but in skincare, cosmetics, etc. But some of these questions that you have as perfumers will actually be addressed next week. So I want to thank the panel, Travis, Sarah, and Danielle. I will post the YouTube video probably this weekend or earlier if I can, but I have a full stack schedule today and tomorrow. So probably Saturday or Sunday, the YouTube will go up. And you can find Travis at Perfumer's Apprentice and Scent Trunk. You can find Sarah at Sarah Horowitz, and you can find Danielle at Notology and Olfactive. And thank you so much. These are really, really great questions, and congratulations to all of you who have your own brands. It's not easy. And the fact that we're all here is so inspiring, and this community, you made it so amazing, and we support you. So don't feel like you're working in a silo. We've all been there. And so if you have questions, this is what the festival is for. This is what the Aroma Village is for. And hopefully we can meet in person. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Come to the closing ceremony. We're going to do a virtual collective perfume. Instead of bringing a potluck to the brunch, bring a top note, middle note, or base note, and then we will take a picture. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate you. This has been so fabulous. Look at all of you. Wow. This is so great. Thank you for coming. Look at all your faces. Wow, from Australia, from Europe. I love this. All over the States. This is amazing. From India, fantastic. Wow. Thank you, everyone. And tell us about your brands, you know, don't be shy. Like, post up, tell us who you are, what your brand is, how we can support each other. So thank you very, very much. Hello from Brazil. Ciao. Bom dia. Yay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Ciao.